We all want to be healthy, but we all have limited time. We have a big culture now that's like, you should do this, 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 and this. And then we're all trying to stick to it, but we're all getting such varied results. And no one's saying, what they found is that people are picking up their phone between 175 times to 220 times a day.
Oh my God. Learning about zone 2 training was probably one of the biggest impacts of my own training.
I would run every day, get up and do the 5 a.m. club, do my hits at 6 a.m. And actually, I never felt worse. Kiwi, I say kiwi because it helps repair. And I think it's very underestimated.
Oh, really? Sarah Ann, what's the first thing you do when you wake up?
The first thing I do when I wake up, I think I have a massive glass of water, actually. It sounds so boring, but that's the first thing I do.
Exactly the same as me. It works.
Yeah.
Okay. Breakfast, eat it or skip it?
I now eat it.
Okay.
From filming Live Well, Be Well, I have realised that women should not skip breakfast. So.
Okay, right, amazing. We will come back to that. What's the most underrated piece of fruit?
Kiwi.
Kiwi, okay. If I was to download an app that could cap it, what's the maximum number of hours I should spend on my phone in a day?
Okay, I know this because I just recently interviewed neuroscientist TJ Power, and anything over 3 hours changes the white matter of your brain. And it also has other changes as well. So, I mean, most of us spend way more than that, but the the minimum, like the max that you should spend is 3 hours. But what they found is that people are picking up their phone between 175 times to 220 times a day.
Oh my God.
So we're going like 6 hours, like minimum at the moment.
And does that include laptop time or is that just phone screen time?
Phone screen time.
Okay, good for you. Okay, final question. What's the biggest difference between female and male nutrition?
The biggest difference is our hormones. Okay. So our hormones influence kind of how we exercise, how we eat, all of that type of stuff. And also how we think about ourselves. So, women's hormones fluctuate. So we do actually have quite a lot of differentiation when it comes to nutrition versus a man. Okay,
amazing. Okay, welcome to the podcast. So today's guest is Sarah Ann Macklin, host of the Live Well, Be Well podcast. Sarah Ann has a first-class honours degree in human nutrition, registered nutritionist of the AFN variety, and has been hailed as the Jamie Oliver of nutrition. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So you obviously seriously qualified yourself. You've had over 500 guests on the podcast, I believe. So with all of this expertise, with all of this amazing knowledge you've acquired over the years, really interested to hear of all of this. What do you actually integrate into your own life and into your own day? Okay, so I guess a good place to start is I just saw on your Instagram that you posted a picture of a lake this morning and said the perfect way to start the day. So good timing. So what was that all about? I did my research.
I have been writing about Zone 2 for next week's newsletter on my Substack, The Compassionate Cure. And I've interviewed quite a lot of people in this area. And what I basically realized is I used to come from a very optimization culture. I was a previous model. Everything was based on what I looked like. And also 10 years ago, it was very different in the health landscape. But now I see it's gone to this crazy optimization culture. And I would run every day, get up and do the 5 a.m. club, do my hits at 6 a.m. And actually, I never felt worse, but I felt like I was following all the rules that I was meant to be doing. Yep. So now I really changed my training, and I do quite a few days at Zone 2. And if no one knows what that is, it's basically a fast walking pace where you're struggling to kind of keep a conversation going. Like you are getting out of breath, but you're not exhausting yourself like a hit. So it's that kind of in between. You're getting your heart rate up, but you don't want to throw up, basically. And so what I'm now doing is trying to do that a few days a week, mixing it in with light conditioning, and then doing 1 to 2 runs a week. And my runs go into Zone 4, which is where my heart rate really goes up.
But the Zone 2 training, is a Zone 2 run that you're doing.
Well, I did a Zone 4 today. Okay. And the reason why I did it is because it was the only day of the week where I was going to really kind of push myself onto that scale. But before, I would be doing that nearly every day. I was doing hits and runs and, really intensity training. Yeah. And so what was really nice is that it was sunny today and I thought I haven't trained and cardio for like 9 days. Today's the day I'm going to go out and start my day, not look at my laptop and just go for a run. So it was a really good way to start my day. And I enjoyed it even more because I wasn't doing it all the time.
Yeah. So do you keep a nice balance of zone 2 training and zone 4 training then? Like what's your balance between the two?
Yeah. So I tried to do like 3 to 4 days a week of zone 2 and then like 1 to 2 of zone 4. So I try and push myself a couple of days a week, but the rest I'm staying on zone 2. And that for me is like the optimum for where I feel my best.
Okay, and is that running? Is that zone 2 and zone 4? Are they all runs, or is that with some HIIT strength training as well?
So I'll do one zone 4 run, which is like fast pace, and then I'll do a mix of conditioning where I will go up into zone 4, but then I also taper it back down to zone 2. So I'm kind of going in between the two.
Okay, sorry to dive so much into the weeds straight away.
No,
yeah, zone
I love
2.
it.
Yeah, so zones. Yeah, I did a lot of training with the different zones. Learning about zone 2 training was probably one of the biggest. Had one of the biggest impacts on my own training. Most people spend the whole time just running in zone 4 and zone 5 even, and that's when your body's burning a lot more sugar as a fuel source over fat. When you're running in zone 2 or doing any training in zone 2, that's when your body's predominantly burning fat as a fuel source, maybe some amount
And
of sugar.
lactate.
Yeah, exactly. So you're always burning some balance of the two. So in theory, if you train in zone 2, I did once hear that you have enough fat in your body to do 9 back-to-back Ironmen in zone, if you can keep your heart rate in zone 2. That's what I heard. Maybe it was a rumor, but
Are you going to give that a go? You're going to prove this theory, Alex.
I mean, I feel like maybe I did. I did do 100-mile run and I did stay in zone 2. And like I can tell you, the challenge isn't the fitness side of it. I felt like I could keep on going forever, cardio wise. So it really does work. My body was literally falling apart. I was in floods of tears by the end, but my fitness was kind of carrying me through. So I had enough fat to carry me. Yeah. And what about the strength training side? Do you do any gym work? Do you do anything like that? Because I hear that is very important for longevity.
100%. Your muscle mass is critical for longevity. And you can imagine me coming from the modeling industry and being a woman, I was like terrified of strength training. I always remember the Tracy Anderson. She was huge about it. She's still big now, but not that I like calling out names, but I remember her saying 10 years ago, she probably completely changed her tune now, but don't go over 3K weights because you'll bulk. And it really stuck in my brain. I was terrified. I was like, oh, I can't pick up like larger dumbbells than 3K, which now I know from educating myself is absolute nonsense. And like the most important thing for yourself, even for like your spine and everything, your muscle mass, is to do strength training in the correct way. But I think also having the confidence to do it correctly, because if you're also holding a bad form, you're also going to do so much more damage. But, I'm really interested in mental health and like how we perform and how our brains, can optimize to the best standards that we can grasp. And muscle mass is one of the most important things for it. So it's not just important for, scarpopenia, as you get older, and osteoporosis and all of those things. It's also so important for your brain health, your optimization with your cognitive functioning. And you're busy as a founder, I'm busy as a founder. So I'm always wanting to not just sit at a desk and rely on like the food and coffee. I'm also like, what else can I do? And so strength training is really important, but it's also I think it's very underspoken about, especially when it comes to women, because I think we're all scared that we're going to become bulky.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say so few women that I know actually do any strength training. But, I feel like I'm in some kind of echo chamber, because every time I open Instagram, there's some other influencer or health influencer who is advocating or sharing the latest research and how important strength training is. And I feel like shaking some of her friends and just saying, come on, guys, like we really need to be doing something here, And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like I just do 3 30-minute sessions a week in my back garden. It's just really nice. I do it really slowly, really chilled, nothing too crazy. Like I barely even break a sweat. So it's just a nice way to start the day. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to some like gym full of meatheads. You can just do it at home in your sitting room.
Totally.
Okay, cool. So your main your main qualifications obviously are around nutrition. So let's dive into the nutrition side of things. So maybe let's start the day with breakfast. So for you, what is a nutritionist? What does a nutritionist breakfast look like?
It's got protein in it.
Okay,
That's like one of the biggest things. I used to be the person that started with like fruit and a black coffee, and you can imagine my glucose and hormone crashes were not great. Or I really got into the phase of intermittent fasting, but then I also love training. Like for me to get my headspace, and it's different for a man because you don't have the same like hormonal changes that we have. It's not actually as important that you have to have breakfast, but for a woman it especially is. And Dr. Stacey Sims is someone who I massively admire, and she's taught me so much when it comes to women's health, because so much of the science is done on men. Because they don't want to study women because we have these menstrual cycles that muck up all the like very specific results that they want to get. We're so complicated in the best possible way. So it's interesting. So I kind of gone through everything, and now like realizing how important protein is in the morning, all the amino acids, it builds your muscles, but it also really works with making sure that you stabilize your hormones and your cortisol, which is the highest in the morning when you wake up. So for me, I love either eggs in the morning, or I love full fat Greek yogurt with all the goodness like chia seeds, flax seeds, berries, kiwi. I say kiwi because it helps repair DNA, and I think it's very underestimated.
Oh, really?
So yeah. It's like a little superfood. Without being like a buzzword, but it's full of fiber. So I try and have like very good quality protein with either full fat Greek yogurt or eggs, and then I try and have berries, flax seeds, chia seeds, and chia seeds are full of protein. Flax seeds, you've got your fibers, you've got your omega-3s in there as well, and then you've got your fruits, which has got like your antioxidants and things. So that's how I try and start my day, or just some scrambled eggs.
Okay, wow. And you make there's a protein smoothie recipe that I saw online. So is that a breakfast smoothie that you have? So you've kind of got the eggs, you've got the yogurty kind of breakfast, or you've got a smoothie type breakfast?
Yeah, and I make that when I know that I've got a really early morning and I don't actually have time. Those times when we're like, I've really tried to stop myself buying prep. Or like, when you're like running out and you're like, I'll just grab something when I'm gone. I will make that smoothie and take it with me. Whether I'm like going to the gym to have it as pre-fuel, or if I'm like off filming, I've always got that the night before. It takes like 2 seconds to make, and you can keep it in the fridge. So, and that's got kefir yogurt in, which has got the protein in it. And then I put some protein powder in as well. Avocado for the healthy fats. So it's a very good balance, the one that I have online, and it is literally, it takes me 30 seconds to make.
Okay.
We all want to be healthy, but we all have limited time. So it's like, what's the smallest thing that I can make in the limited amount of time that I've got?
Make it anything you can make the day before has got to be a winner, definitely. And what protein powder do you put in it?
So I don't have meat.
I'm
veggie. And so, and not that whey protein is bad, but I tend to try and not go towards whey protein, and I try to go more towards like any type of vegan protein. So Form Nutrition is one that I like personally, and they do some really great protein vegan blends, which I really like. Not that I'm against hemp or any whey protein or anything. It's just not. It's personal preference.
Okay, cool, nice. You mentioned a minute ago around the fact that you used to intermittent fast but don't anymore. Is that what? So you used to skip breakfast? Like what kind of? How did you intermittent fast? Oh, really?
I always used to. So I personally suffer with colitis and like problems with my stomach, and so being a nutritionist, I found it really interesting that all the research, all these kind of trends come from good clinical research. And so a lot of the intermittent fasting came from people that really suffered with Crohn's and colitis and ulcerative colitis. And they would find that when you would rest for 16 hours, it would really help the gut microbiome flourish, and it would also reduce inflammation. So when I started finding out this research, I was really interested because, again, I think you always go into something, and you'll know this from when you start interviewing a whole range of different people in different fields. You all of a sudden you become open to all different natures of people, and you're like, why are you so passionate about this?
Yeah.
And like a lot of my own research and understandings and want to know more about this is because of like my own personal journey.
Same like
and
all
so
of
for
us.
me, when it came, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was the mind and my stomach. Then they're the
Yeah.
two things that I'm really, really curious about.
Okay.
And so I started experimenting on my own self, and then I interviewed Dr. Satchi Panda, who brought out the 16/8 kind of intermittent fasting trend. And so I found that really interesting, that, it would help reduce inflammation and it would help kind of your gut microbiome flourish. So I would then intermittent fast. But it was also, when you're busy, you're like, oh, it's easy to skip breakfast, because I didn't naturally wake up hungry. So I was kind of playing around with my own philosophy with it. But it wasn't until I spoke to Dr. Stacey Sims, so she was like, it's actually really bad for a woman and their hormones. And we should be eating something, even if it's just a coffee with some protein powder in, just something to flatten that kind of spike of curve in the morning. So I then started changing my own kind of health plan in regards to like where it is with women's health. But men, it's very different, you guys. You can intermittent fast and still.
I mean, I did try the whole skipping breakfast thing for a while when I had a job, like an actual office job, not my current job. And I'd skip breakfast, but I just found the whole morning I was just sitting thinking about food. I just couldn't stop thinking about food because I love food so much. Then by the time I could eat at lunch, I would literally just gorge on everything I could get my hands on, and then spend the rest of the afternoon just like eating everything, just trying to make up for the lost calories, because I was really conscious I didn't want to eat fewer calories. So tried it for a while, then stopped it. So
trying to also get all of your calories in like 8 hours is really difficult. And plus, I do think if you do it, you have to do it. You have to really be on it with your nutrition, which a lot of people don't have time for. And at the same time, if you're already feeling sluggish, like if everything in your like your blood glucose is dropping, it might also affect your blood pressure. Your brain energy is not going to be getting the fuel that it needs. And then also if you're training, that's also going to be harming your training. So I think like it's really interesting. There's so many now different studies. It also depends on your training style. Like how much are you burning? How much do you need to refuel? Like all of those things play such a big part in whether you should be intermittent fasting or not. And I think that's the interesting thing, right? A lot of this started from people that suffered with Crohn's, colitis, and inflammation. And for those people, it could be amazing, similar to the ketogenic diet. That started in children that suffered with epilepsy. And actually, we know that when we put children who are epileptic on a very, very high ketogenic diet, so much more than what we speak about it on trend, when it's really taken seriously in hospital, like these children, like half their fits, they don't have the same epileptic seizures because it does rewire the brain. So it's like all of these kind of studies do stem from interesting research, but then we take it sometimes more mainstream, and then we all have mixed results on how we feel. And so I think that's like the nuance on it, right?
People love just taking anything and just taking it to the extreme. What about, like, I hear a lot of people here who are doing these long multi-day fasts. Like, what do you think about these like 5-day water fasts and that kind of thing? Like, do you buy into it? Like, I've never tried a multi-day fast, and I don't think I ever will, because I just love food too much, and I don't feel bad enough to. But then some people claim that if you do one, then you feel amazing. But I don't feel like I need to feel any better than I do now, really. So maybe I don't need to do one.
I think that's the answer, right? I think we'll always try to seek for like, what's the next? Like, I want to get to that next stage of feeling great, but we're all built so differently. I find it interesting. I've been surrounded by a lot of people that have done it, and I've had mixed results. I've also spoken to like one of the top clinics around it, to whether I would go and do one or not, and actually to report it on the podcast. And I said that I will obviously tell the truth. Like, if I find it horrific, I will say it's horrific. So this is up to you. But they were very strong in saying, we don't think you will. But the interesting thing is, I think, people will say like, it's helped with my fertility, or it's helped reverse my Crohn's or my inflammation. Everyone has their own anecdotal story. And I think if you're taking someone who's like in high pressure, people who are doing this normally also have quite a lot of money to spend on these kind of crazy fasts. But I do think that, the biggest thing here is that you could take someone out. It could be the fact that you're just slowing everything down. They're getting into parasympathetic. Their body is going through a lot of, cell death and regeneration. And all of a sudden they're feeling, oh my gosh, I'm taking all the toxins out of my body. And not on the environmental toxins and all of those things, and they do feel better. I think the actual kind of research that I would find interesting of that is, well, what do they feel like 3 months down the line? Like, is that one small 5-day fast actually having a long benefit, or are those people going back to a crazy, hectic life?
Yeah. What I'd find interesting is, actually, if they did some research on someone who doesn't eat a diet that's full of ultra processed foods, someone who doesn't eat until, the moment they fall asleep at night, they stop eating 3 hours before bed, so they go to bed with an empty stomach and they have a much better sleep. Someone who has a decent diet and just ticks the basics,
Totally.
how they would, how different it would be for them, and probably not very different.
I think the thing that I worry about with these fasts, and I mean, I have spoken to some of these clinics, and some of their results are amazing, but they have 10 doctors on call. So I mean, it is so, it's like scrutinized. Don't go to one that's in like Ibiza and people just like fast for 10 days. Like, that really worries me. But if you're actually going to a clinic and it's being kind of like done operationally correctly, there is some really like interesting results. I wouldn't advocate it. And I had to really think, I'm still thinking like, should I do it? I'm worried about, my metabolism. And I do think that just thinking about your brain and like how it works with so much food deprivation, are you going to put weight on afterwards? Like, how does because you're basically starving yourself and telling your body, well, like, there's no more food coming in. And so similarly, like once those mechanisms start working, yes, you'll return to baseline, but sometimes you might also go the other way because your body's storing the food and the calories and everything because it's thinking at any point it could go back into starvation. So you see that with people that have like dieted for a long time, that their metabolism, starts worrying that they might all of a sudden start restricting their food intake again. So, I think if it's done in a correct setting, you might find something very interesting, but I wouldn't personally advocate that that's a longevity protocol.
Yeah. I wonder psychologically what impact it has on people with food as well, because, food is such a psychological thing for many people. Like, I feel like when my health was so bad and my stomach was so bad, I went through a phase of just cutting out so many different foods and following different diet after different diet and trying everything, and got to the point where I was afraid of eating most foods. And I definitely had massive food anxieties. Like, I was so afraid of eating most foods that it caused some kind of flare up. And it was just all these different things of just trying to obsess over food and don't eat then and do eat then and eat this, don't eat this. It just totally messed me up. So I think you've got to be careful of the psychological side.
I say that everyone is connected to an eating disorder at some stage. And people think about eating disorders in such an interesting way. They go, well, it's anorexia nervosa, or someone will be sick and they've got bulimia. But that's such a small amount. Psychology plays such a big role in every decision that we make. And there's so many different eating disorders, and some that are recognized in the DSM-5, which is, the manual for mental health disorders, even though I hate that word. And some that aren't, orthorexia, where people are scared of certain foods and they only want to eat cleanly. It's still not recognized in that manual. But what I do say is, like, we all have a pull. Like, we all have those moments where we think about something in our childhood and we'll have a craving because we want to eat it. That's psychological. That's your brain saying, oh my God, that reminds me of a memory and I want to feel that again because it's so comforting. It doesn't mean that you have a sickness and an illness which is controlling you, but all of it's driven psychologically. You'll go out and you'll really look forward to a meal with friends because you're like, the whole environment with the food, it kind of adds that next stage to it. Same with alcohol. Alcohol, you're driven by wanting to either like completely forget something, or because you want that kind of hit of serotonin and like all of those feel-good hormones that it does drive for a small amount of time. So everything's like psychological that it brings. And so I think like that is one of the most important things to when you look at food. Like, a lot of my research now and all the work that I'm doing at the moment is driven on that aspect. And it's driven on how we think about ourselves also influences how we metabolize that food. Like, how we hormonally respond to that food has an impact. And so
how we think about ourselves
study.
Or how we think about the food.
Both. So our thoughts will change. So if they're very negative, you'll have a very different outcome to the same meal if you had a very positive feeling about yourself. And people have been speaking about this in lots of different dimensions for like a long time. But the one kind of study that really took my eye, which then drove me more into this field, was an amazing researcher at Stanford called Leah Crum.
Right.
She's really does all this amazing work in mindset. And one of the studies that she did, she had a randomized control group, so an RCT, and it was placebo controlled. So like one of the highest you can get, a gold standard. And she brought them all in and she said, okay, I'm going to give you some food to eat. And then I want to come out and take blood tests. And so they went in, they had this food, took the blood tests, and then she brought them back a week later. And she said to one of the group, and she mixed them all up. She said to one of the group, you guys have what's known as the FTO gene, which is also called the fat gene. And that basically means that you hold and you don't metabolize food as well, and kind of gave them all of the scenarios of what this fat gene meant. She said to the other group, oh, you don't have the fat gene, so you metabolize food great. And she kind of took them all through that side and gave them things to read. So these two groups, one mindset was thinking, oh my gosh, I have this gene that makes me predisposed to be fat.
Yeah.
And then they're given food to eat. And then the other group was thinking, oh, this is great. I'm obviously going to be like thin and I don't have to worry about this. And they put in, again, after that, the same setting with the same food. So everything else was controlled. And they both responded to the same meal differently. And they measured that by looking at their ghrelin hormone, which I call a gremlin, which is like the hormone that spikes out to tell you if you're hungry. And the one that they were told that they metabolized food well had a reduced amount of it. They weren't that hungry. And the ones that did had an increased amount of it. So it's really interesting. Like when you start looking at research where it's like you can give people the best rules on how to eat, but just how they think influences that decision, and also the metabolism and hormones and everything. All of this starts changing the landscape and how we should talk about health.
Totally.
And I think it's really underspoken about. We have a big culture now that's like, you should do this, 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 and this. And then we're all trying to stick to it, but we're all getting such varied results. And no one's saying, like, how do you feel about yourself? Because that's kind of also going to dictate how you choose the choices and how you feel and where your stress is and all of those things. So that's what I find and what I'm working in a lot at the moment.
Amazing. I feel like there's a similar study, similar learning on coffee, which is basically when there's been so much research into this, where you give people decaf without knowing it's decaf, and you give people coffee, and people who drink the decaf have a similar level of performance enhancement, similar amount of energy and mental alertness as people who drink caffeine, just because they expect the coffee to have that impact on them. I guess it's a big thing that I believe in as well, which is kind of along those lines, is that, if you think you're going to have a reaction to a food that you're eating, then there's a very good chance that you're going to have a reaction, and it could potentially be, made worse, magnified, or caused full stop from you thinking you're going to have a reaction to it. And now I don't believe that any food is going to give me a reaction, but I just eat a very balanced diet and a bit of everything. And I've reintroduced everything into my diet, which has just been such a huge psychological weight lifted, but I don't push anything. So, I know that if I eat a lot of yogurt, then that'll be too much for me, but I don't push it. And when I eat the small amount of yogurt that I eat it just thinking, I'm okay with this. It's not going to have any kind of impact. So I think
Totally.
I think that's huge for food. So
can I ask you a question? What was your bridge to getting that? Because I think what I'm really aware of is, I had a similar journey from coming from an extreme kind of mindset into one now that's not like that at all, but it's taken me a long time because I've also researched about it. So I've really understood the mechanisms, but the friction that I see is where everyone is they have their own backstory. Everyone has their own narrative. What was your stepping stone into allowing, I guess the thing is freedom and letting go. What was your how did you get that?
I'd say what the biggest change for me was, my stomach was terrible. That was the root of all of my evils, all of my many, many symptoms. Every symptom I had came with stomach pain. So I had such a very diverse range of symptoms, but at the same time as having any one of them, I'd have stomach pain. So I kind of knew it all stemmed from the gut. And I was seeing Alex Manos, who's a functional medicine practitioner at the time. This was 6-7 years ago, just before launching Exhale. And the first few times I saw him, it was all very much about, okay, you might have some kind of gut dysbiosis, take these probiotics, take these natural herbal medicines to try and kill something off in the gut. And it was very focused on all of that side of things. But then by the third or fourth time that I saw him, when these things kind of helped, but didn't really help long term. Maybe I just told myself that they'd help, and then they briefly might have helped, but I went straight back to all the same symptoms. So nothing was helping, literally, when we were trying everything, And at the same time as seeing him, I was in every hospital across London, literally. And eventually he just turned around and he was like, look, there could be a psychological element to this. And he was like, look, you're living in a city you don't want to live in. You're doing a job you don't want to do. And he's like, until you solve those things, get a sense of fulfillment back into your life, and just change your mindset just across everything, and he was, and just, yeah. And not think, and he mentioned, not think that foods are going to cause a reaction. And he started me off on this kind of path around how mindset literally, impacts your whole health, literally.
So, everything. Yeah. It's like, I'm the biggest believer in that.
Yeah, definitely.
I just don't think it's spoken about enough. What an amazing guy. I'm so glad that he gave you that advice. And
yeah, no, I'd recommend anyone.
And
then after that, I persuaded him to join Exhale as our, chief wellness officer. So now he's part of the business. But I'd recommend anyone to kind of follow his latest, where his research is now, and he's very like cutting edge, whatever's going on. But yeah, okay. So maybe actually something else to talk about that is aligned with all of this is neurodiverse. So neurodiversity and how diet plays into that, because yeah, I think you've recently found out that you have ADHD. Is that right? And then how does diet and nutrition support that, cause that? Like, how does it play? How does it impact it?
In so many ways. I found out I was dyslexic first when I was 24. When I left my first career as a model and had a bit of a breakdown and decided to go and figure out how I could support myself, and went to study nutritional science. I then went to drop out 6 weeks later, because I was like, I was in biochemistry lectures, and I was like, I don't know what anyone's talking about. And anyway, my professor very kindly figured out I was neurodivergent, but only found out I had dyslexia. And that led me on a mission to want to understand. This is why I got very invested in mental health and cognitive health. And I remember being in a lecture around essential fatty acids with omega-3s, and just realizing that over 50% of your cell membranes are made up of these, but you can only get them from eating oily fish. And the reason why is because oily fish eat the algae. Right. And so you can take an algae supplement. You can obviously get other foods that are abundant with omega-3s, but they're the much shorter chains. They're called AHA. And they don't basically convert into these longer chains, the DHAs that we need for our cell membranes. They did about 1,000 years ago, but because of evolution, we've lost the enzyme that converts that one into the longer chains, because we have so much omega-6 in our diet. So a lot of these plant oils, the whole seed oil debate that you see going online, all of this stuff, very, very rich in omega and omega-6s. And so that's quite pro-inflammatory, and anti-inflammatory is omega-3. And so because we now have a ratio of it's like 20-1 or something, or someone the other day it was 24-1, because we have such a high omega-6 ratio, basically this shorter chain omega-3 fatty acid doesn't get converted into these longer chains before everyone starts putting in comments that you can get, omega-3s from walnuts and chia seeds and things. You can. They just don't really convert into the longer chains unless you literally have no omega-6 in your diet, which also is not healthy. You should be having some omega-6, just not the amount that we do. So I found this really interesting. I was like, wow, I wonder if that would work with someone who's dyslexic and someone who's neurodivergent. So I was on my own again, understanding of myself. And I would go to these amazing talks at Oxford with a doctor who has dedicated all of her research, Dr. Alex Richardson, to looking at dyslexic children and children that have ADHD and seeing if they have more oily fish in their diet. What does that look like in terms of their ability? And she did lots of different researches, and she would give some children 3 portions of oily fish a week. And over time, they not overcame their chronicle reading age, they also overtook their peers against the controls. And so it was really interesting. I was like, wow, that was one of my first moments when I realized over 10 years ago that, food actually does have a massive impact on your mental health. I was like, well, if this is impacting children that are struggling with dyslexia, and we're not just trying to get them to read more, something that they hate, or try to understand things when they're so frustrated, Imagine if we also treated them with food. That's really interesting. So obviously I started eating a lot more fish and was putting that into my diet, and then started realizing like how profound it is. So that's one of the main things that I would say is, when it comes to neurodiversity, like if you're a vegan or vegetarian, like make sure you're supplementing with an algae or a fish oil, and making sure you're having an abundance of omega-3 in your diet. That's like one of the main starting points that I would say with
that's someone
neurodiversity.
if you're vegan, not if you've got ADHD necessarily.
Well, both. So if you've got
Okay.
ADHD and you're a vegan, you will be getting no omega-3 in your diet, because you can only get it from from oily fish, unless you're supplementing with algae. So if you have ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, omega-3 plays a really big role. So I would look generally at making sure you're having around 3 portions of oily fish a week, or supplementing with a really good supplement. And when I talk about supplements, it's really important, because most supplements are only around 30% full of DHA.
Okay.
You want to be looking for a supplement that has higher DHA than EPA, because they're the 2 longer chains. So one that's got more abundance of DHA, but you also want to be making sure the quality of your supplement is like 90% full of this omega-3, because a lot of them will have bulkers and fillers and all of that type of stuff. So you can see on the back kind of the percentage of how much is in that supplement. So that's really important. I'm not sponsored by them, but I really like Minami. I think they do really good supplements for omega-3. Again, like no affiliation, but always people like, what's your recommendation? But then also if you are a vegan or you're a vegetarian, you will not be getting any omega-3 sources. So it's even more critical if you have neurodiversity to make sure that you're really kind of putting oily fish in or supplementing. So that's like one of the things that I would say with neurodiversity that's played like a really interesting role in what I found.
Interesting. Okay, so go on then. Supplements. Let's take the conversation to supplements. So you're obviously very knowledgeable on nutrition and diet and everything like that. But do you still take supplements? Like, do you when my health was terrible? And sorry to keep taking it back to my health, but when my health was terrible, I was taking dozens of different supplements. I was spending like £500 a month probably easily on different supplements.
Wow.
Then over the years, I kind of weaned myself off all of them. But then I feel like in the last year, I've started adding a few more back into my diet to slightly optimize things, not to treat sickness, to more optimize things. So do you think that there is a place for supplements? You obviously just stated one obvious place, but do you take many yourself? What's your view on supplements?
It's interesting. If someone eats 3 portions of oily fish a week, they don't need to supplement.
Yeah.
To me, food is always really first. But the interesting word about supplement is it is a supplement. It's meant to supplement your diet. And so now there's such an interesting variety of diets for ethical reasons, environmental reasons, people that love animals, people that want to support the environment. And I totally get all of that. And I think it's really admirable when someone's doing something because they believe in something. If it's solely for health and someone's eating a really balanced diet, there's still certain ones that I think are important, like vitamin D if you live in the UK. Now, if you live in LA or Australia where you get beautiful sunshine all year round, you don't need vitamin D. But if you live in Sweden or England or the Nordic countries, you really do need a vitamin D supplement kind of all year round.
Okay.
So there are certain things that are really important to have wherever you but it really depends on your demographic, your age, your lifespan, men versus a woman. But I do think that depending on your diet, if you're a vegan, then you have to be supplementing with B12. And a lot of people I know that don't speak about that. And I guess one of the things that I remember a professor telling me, and this always stuck in my brain about being a vegan, because there was a point where I was a vegan.
Yeah.
And it was a very short amount of time. And I went on a similar journey to you where I tried to do an elimination diet and I was cutting everything out. And then I was so scared I was going to have an attack that I think I would spin myself out. But then when I was learning about the power of foods, I was like, wow, I don't think I'm helping myself at all. But I didn't have anyone to help navigate it with me. And I remember them saying, and this is true, it's scientifically backed, that if you see a patient who has been on a very plant-based diet for a very, very long amount of time, sometimes they can start feeling like they're losing their memory or they've got really bad brain fog. And they might come to you and, the worrying sign is that some people go, God, I'm worrying if I'm getting dementia. You know, sometimes when people make jokes and they go, God, I'm so forgetful. I feel like I'm scared I'm going to get dementia. The thing is, you have this myelin sheath that is like your protective shield around your vagus nerve that runs kind of from the back of your kind of brain, hippocampus, all the way down into your colon, sending signals. The myelin sheath over time, the really important cofactor is B12. If you're not having B12 over time, it starts degrading and it starts going down, and that can initiate memory loss and it can start mimicking things like dementia. Now, it's not like the liver where someone comes in and, you know, you can regenerate the liver quite easily. Like the myelin sheath, once it started degrading, like you can stop it, but you can't rebuild it. So those things of memory loss will stay. You can stop it from getting worse, but if someone's been on a plant-based diet for like 45 years plus, it's like a very hard, you know, thing to kind of reverse. So one of the biggest things that is B12 is so important. So making sure that if you are like on a plant-based diet for whatever reason, just take a supplement, because B12 you can only get from animal sources. If you're a vegetarian, you eat eggs and things, you'll be totally fine. But I think it's one of those moments where that's like where a supplement plays such a big role. And it's really important. So they're the ones that I would say are like your non-negotiables depending on what diet you're on. And then you've got like the whole new wave of like creatine.
Do you take creatine?
I do take creatine. I take creatine because now I'm kind of in my 30s and I'm weight training a lot more. And it's really interesting. I mean, I'm not in perimenopause yet, but you know, people say perimenopause starts from 32 onwards. This kind of starts of it. Like it is really important for those kind of functions to think about taking creatine and for your performance.
It's one that I've added in recently. Yeah, I've added that in the last year. It's one that I took when I was like an 18-year-old kind of trying to get bigger at the gym and then stopped when I realized when I realized it didn't actually make me any bigger without the hard work. So
you can't just take creatine and think you're gonna get muscle. See, I was the opposite. I was like, I'm not taking creatine. I'm not doing over 3 kg weights, and I'm not taking creatine, because it was just such bad messaging. Now I will, but you know, there's amazing studies that now show that when you're sleep deprived, or if you've had like a couple of really bad nights sleep, so anyone that's got young kids or travels, taking up to 10 to 20 grams of creatine, like increasing your dose, obviously you might get some GI distress, but increasing it can really help reduce fatigue. So now I travel with it because I travel a lot. I will increase my dosages when I'm traveling, and I do feel that it makes me less fatigued.
Okay, random segue. I believe you're flying tomorrow, are you? You heading to America shortly, did you say?
I'm heading in a couple of days.
In a couple of days. Okay, so you'll be taking a creatine with you, but like, so what are the, how much creatine do you take each day, first of all?
I take 5 grams every day, but if I'm traveling, I'll take between 10 and 15. And if I'm really exhausted, like I've had barely any sleep, I'll push it at 20.
Nice. When I interviewed Rupert, he takes 15 grams every day, first thing in the morning, in his glass of water, knocks it back, then he's done. Okay, so you're flying in a few days. So like what, do you have any tips to help the jet lag or just to keep kind of balance? Because you're so busy, like you've got a few different businesses on the go, you're traveling the world. Like what are your like tips for kind of just, I don't know, not burning out? Like
speaking to a woman who's had 2 extreme burnouts here. So yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? I'm so in health, yet I'm the one who burns out. And I think that's, you know, I think I do what I do because I have to remind myself all the time of these things. But you know, for me, I have a really big superpower that I can sleep anywhere. You can chuck me anywhere on a plane, and as long as I just put an eye mask on, I can literally just pass out. I mean, sitting out wherever. And so for me, I always try and go on time zones. So if I'm going to LA, that's a great one because you get bad jet lag, but you can actually, it's long enough to sleep on a flight, whereas New York, your window is so short that you also still feel a bit not great when you get off. So I always try and set my time to where I'm going. That's one of my main things. I generally don't eat plain food.
Me neither.
I also, I pack my own stuff. I'll have like a big meal before I get on, pack like nuts, fruits, all of that stuff, loads of water. Electrolytes are amazing, especially when I'm traveling. I feel like that really, really helps me. So you get so much water retention when you're flying as well. So doing all of those things. I always put my legs up against a wall when I get back, which one grounds me, but like pulls all the water weight down. Sauna, if I can get to a sauna, I'll do that, which I really, really feel helps. There's like, I feel like over the years I've built up a bit of a strategy and a routine for myself
Nice.
on how to be, and I touch words, I don't suffer with it. I said that now I'm probably going to suffer, but I'm pretty methodical with my jet lag.
And what about, so many things you just said there. Electrolytes. Do you buy into the whole electrolytes thing? Do you take electrolytes in the morning every day in your water? You do. Okay.
I do. And I hadn't for a long time. And do you know why? And it sounds so silly. I should know this. This is such basic knowledge, but I hadn't applied it to myself. I don't know if you do, but women in general, and I especially, do suffer with really low blood pressure, and dehydration is a big thing. And I mean, I've got a cup of decaf, but still coffee, like sat here. And I'm sometimes, when I'm on the go, I just do forget to drink. And like hydration is the foundation of health, but also I sweat a lot, I go to the gym, like, all of those things. And so electrolytes are amazing for that. But what's also great is with low blood pressure, if you get dehydrated, your blood pressure plummets much quicker. And so I've had moments where I'm fainting a lot. I mean, I actually did it last Friday. We went to the Lake District. We were walking for 2 days. I actually wasn't drinking that much water, oversharing, but I was like, if I need to drink loads, I'm going to have to pee the whole time. So I just not going to drink loads of water. Stupid decision. Got on the train and felt so sick. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And my blood pressure had got so low. And then I got home and just passed out. And it was one of those things that it's literally water that would have made my blood pressure rise, but I just hadn't thought about it. And so immediately I got electrolytes, and within like an hour or whatever, I was feeling so much better.
Amazing.
So I think it depends on your lifestyle, but I think there's ones that are full of sugar and aren't great for you.
Yeah. And artificial sweeteners. A lot of them have artificial sweeteners as well. I love these podcasts. I feel like I'm learning so much about myself for purely selfish reasons. I have ridiculously low blood pressure, but I've never heard that about linking dehydration and blood pressure. So there you go.
Yes,
another line of avenue for me to research. So thank you.
Good. Yeah, electrolytes, love them.
So most of our audience, I feel like, are women. It's heavily skewed towards
love
women.
That.
Yeah, I think it's because Kirsty, who should be presenting this podcast, but she just doesn't like this kind of thing. She writes our email newsletter, which goes out every week to all of our customers. So I feel like definitely the ones that engage with the newsletter and answer all of our surveys are pretty much mostly women. So while we've got you on the podcast, let's dive into the male versus female nutrition. So you mentioned earlier that there are some obvious differences, but do you want to just maybe explain a bit about the differences between male and female?
Yeah, so there's a real mixture. I would say somebody who has taught me so much is Dr. Stacey Sims, and I don't think I realized the gap in women's health until I spoke to her. And that saddens me, being a woman myself as a scientist. I had no idea that most research has been done on males. Male physiology. And so we are just completely different creatures, like genetically from when we're born. We have an XX chromosome, you don't. And so even that changes genetically, like how our mitochondria works, like how that affects our zone 2 training. Like all of these things are so specific. And we also go through so many different hormonal changes. Like women are I'm amazed by women every day. We go through a menstrual cycle every month, which completely changes our body, changes our brain chemistry, our hormone functioning, our water retention, everything. And then we have all these different life stages of like perimenopause and menopause, which are now for the first time in history being spoken about, but still very under-researched and understudied. And so we are different. We're totally different to men. And I mentioned there are a couple of things, like intermittent fasting isn't recommended. But I do think it's really important to state, what is intermittent fasting? Finishing your dinner at 7 or 8 p.m. and breaking your fast at 7 or 8 p.m. in the morning isn't an intermittent fast. That's how we're sometimes talking about it. That's just literally finishing your dinner and going to bed and waking up and having your breakfast the next day. An intermittent fast is, you look at the extreme of Brian Johnson, who's doing his massive experiment on himself at the moment for longevity. A lot of people will finish their dinner at 5 or 6 and break their fast at 12 or 1 the next day, and like you would class that as an intermittent fast. Women shouldn't be doing that, especially during their menstrual cycle. There's been a lot of like controversy at the moment around like cycle training. Like, should you train like what's the type of different phases of training during your cycle? I still think the jury is like very out on that. I think like when it comes to our cycle training, if you think that you should only be doing in more intense types of training when you're ovulating and in the first stage of your cycle, like technically you would probably have more energy, but there's still no like exact research to show that. And then again, like what we were saying, psychologically, you're then telling yourself, oh, it's on my period, so I shouldn't go and do a hard session, but you're actually feeling quite good. So I think, like being you will feel naturally more knackered and tired and PMS during your period and just before, because you do have such a drop in estrogen. And so I think just being aware of your menstrual cycle is really important for women. And I think one of the biggest things that's changed me personally is tracking my menstrual cycle.
Right.
And I use an app called Natural Cycles, again, no affiliation to them. And I have a couple of devices, but I use an Oura ring not for looking at my sleep. I've actually reduced looking at that now because it changes how I think and feel, but it does connect my body temperature to natural cycles. And it tells me like when my period's coming, it goes, your period's come today. And I go, wow, that's why I've been feeling so shit. That's why my cravings have increased. That's why I need more carbohydrates. That's why I don't want to go and do a zone 4 workout.
Yeah.
And so naturally, for instance, like people's partners will go to the gym every day and not change, and that's a man, but a woman is very different. So understanding where we're feeling is really essential. Making sure that you're starting your day with protein is essential. Really important to not train fasted, because you will have a completely different kind of hormonal balance to a man. And that's one of the biggest things that I found out. Zone 2 training isn't actually as important for women as it is for a man.
Okay.
It does, the reason why Zone 2 became so big from Inigo San Milan, who came on, he's actually on our podcast this week. He's the guy who coined Zone 2. He's the one who wanted to understand the different zones. And he was really obsessive around mitochondrial function and like, okay, well, what type of training is going to help the powerhouses of our cells the most with, as you said, like fat and lactate, oxidation, and not just carbohydrates. And yes, Zone 2 has been found to be one of the most, it's not everything, but it's been the most efficient. But women, however, go in between that fat and carbohydrate changes in the mitochondria much more efficiently, due to having this XX chromosome that we're born with, and also due to having to do it all the time because of our menstrual cycles. Like we're always having to fluctuate in between these. So we're way more efficient at doing that than a man. So actually doing the Zone 2 training, yes, it's amazing, but sometimes, and this is what I love when Dr. Stacey Sims told me, she's like, sometimes we just don't have time. And so actually, sometimes just doing like maybe less in the gym but harder is actually more efficient for a woman to go in between those stages. And so I found that really interesting, because I think women naturally are the caretakers, the ones who have to look after the children, even if we're also trying to keep a career going.
So many jobs. Yeah, multitasking all the time. So
we don't have time to be going to the gym and be doing Zone 2 training all the time. So like that's what I found really interesting about the research, that actually, yes, in the literature, but most of that work has also been done on a male. And so when you really go down to, understanding the biochemistry of it, we are a little bit different. And so we do naturally change between these states. So actually we don't have to be doing as much Zone 2 as you think we do. So that's like some of the really interesting kind of phases of nutritional science that is different from a man to a woman.
One last question I had on this. So during I know you mentioned eating more carbohydrates during a period. Like, is there during your cycle, should you change what you eat throughout the cycle? Like, is there a type of food that you could eat to help during the period? Whatever. Is there a dietary? Is there a benefit to modifying your diet throughout the month?
Yeah, I think, as estrogen drops and plummets in the last kind of phase of our cycle, like just before our bleed. So our bleed is day 1, and that's how your cycle starts. In the 4th phase, just before your bleed comes, when your estrogen really does plummet, that's why a lot of people are like, why do I really crave like all of the crap? Like, why do I want ultra processed foods? Why do I want chocolate? Why do I want carbohydrates? Because your body needs more energy. And so you have more energy because you're about to produce a bleed. And so because of that, it is important to have more carbohydrates because your energy demand has increased. So similarly to like going to a gym and doing a really hard workout, your energy demands increase. It's really similar around your menstrual cycle. And so as your energy demands increase, like it is important to be also supporting that with some really good carbohydrates. Really try and reduce the ultra processed because it's not going to make you feel great. And the reason why you do that is because it also alters your brain chemistry. Like your serotonin plummets during this. And people don't realize that. They're thinking, oh, it's just I've got this intense craving. But obviously when what boosts your serotonin is a quick kick of chocolate, is those things that make you feel good. So that's also why you're wanting to have them. So just trying to have like, it sounds a bit of a trend, but trying to have foods that are more anti-inflammatory. So like the oily fish, because that's got the EPA in it, the longer chain omega-3 fatty acids. Trying to have enough protein to keep your fullness levels up so you're more satisfied. Trying to like not drink alcohol as much as you might want to around that time because it's just like not going to help you how you feel. And trying to reduce the sugar is actually going to make you feel better in the long term. And also just, giving yourself a bit of a break. For me, like I just want to go for a walk and lay on the sofa in those evenings and cancel my evening plans and feel like I'm nourishing myself as opposed to exhausting myself. So having more good types of carbohydrates, the brown rice, the sweet potatoes, all the grains, like, the sourdough breads, like great, have that, especially just for your period, because that's when your kind of like calorific load does increase. So that's why you do need it. It's important.
So interesting. Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Right. Before we wrap things up, we have 3 questions that we ask everybody at the end of the podcast. So first one is, what's one habit that you're trying to stop?
Gosh, I think there's a lot. I'm like, which one do I pick? I would say the one, can I say 2? One is not taking my phone to bed, which I'm finding really difficult. And I have tried to reduce all of my,
Come on, that's like 101.
I know, but it's something about, and so it also entwines with stop trying to be more restorative and take breaks, because I'm really hard at that. And that's why they kind of overlap, because, I'm not that I actually do use an email in my Pilates class, but there's definitely been times like my phone's next to me in Pilates, which is, I know, horrific. But I always feel like I've got so many things to do and I feel, I don't want to fall behind. And so that's what I'm trying to get better at. And that part of that is taking the phone out of my bedroom, which honestly, I ask every guest this on the show and everyone says the best thing I've ever done is not have my phone in my bedroom. And I say openly on the show, why can I do this? And it's because I'm human. But it's like not feeling always connected. And that's like my Achilles heel. I'm like, it's like crack. A massive hit of dopamine that I'm struggling to get out of my life.
So you don't get your 3 hours of phone time during the day, just at night in bed. Okay, cool. What is the most overrated piece of health advice, would you say?
That you have to be really disciplined.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah, I don't think you do. I think, I think you have to have like your own boundaries, but I think being too disciplined takes out any joy and fun. And I think joy and connection and all of these things are such a big part of health. And also, I always think about it as like going to work and always taking all the joy sucked out of it. You don't end up wanting to go. And so you have to create some type of balance. And I think there is this kind of culture now in health, which feels that you kind of have to like be so disciplined to be healthy.
Yeah.
And I think I don't believe in that. I think you can be healthy and have so much fun with it. So
I couldn't agree anymore. And actually, probably the most profound thoughts I've heard on this topic was from Laird Hamilton, if you've ever heard of him. He's like this big wave surfer. He's he's quite famous in America for a big surfer. And I think he said something like, what's the point in building this really healthy body, this incredible chassis of a Ferrari or whatever, and then as soon as you eat a pizza, everything just crumbles and you feel horrendous, So I think, I'm at a place where tonight I'm going to go for a pizza. So we're in the middle of a storm we're in Portugal. We're in the middle of this storm. Things have got dark, which is why the lighting in here is really, really weird at the minute. I can hear the storm outside in the window, and I just know that taking the kids for a pizza tonight will just be such a nice way to end the day. So we're going for pizza.
So nice.
We don't do it often.
Good.
and it is sourdough.
Yeah, but I think that's like the joy of life. You'll probably have also actually better than if you just sitting in having something extremely healthy, and all of that is part of if you can't like live your life and enjoy it with your family, then like what's the point of life?
Exactly. Okay, so the last question: what's one habit you think those listening should add into their daily life? The biggest, highest impact habit. 'Cause most people listening probably won't be doing any of this stuff. Assume they're doing none of this. So of everything we've discussed, though, it could be something totally new. What's the one thing, biggest hitter?
Everyone has to take this with the cringe value, because I would take this if I wasn't working on this. But this is something that has fundamentally changed my life, and that's what I think is one of the most important healthy habits that you can have. But being English, we're very averse to doing this, but it's to be way more self-compassionate. We live in a culture also of being on in comparison and never feeling quite enough. And I think all of our health behaviors, we all want to be good. Like we're also all coming from a place of wanting to be better. Like we all intrinsically have that in us. But it normally comes from a place of lack. And actually, if you can start with trying to reframe, you won't even be aware of your inner critic, by the way. Most people I speak to in clinic have no idea of how much they are having negative thoughts. And there's, we have between 80,000 and 90,000 negative thoughts a day. And so it's a lot. Wow. And so I think on that scale, you need is up to like one negative comment balances 3 positive comments, and sometimes people even say 5. And so I think like the healthy habit of just speaking to yourself as you would a friend or someone that you cared about, if that's a form of self-respect for yourself. And so I think if you can start with that, not only does it change your stress hormones, does it change how you see yourself, but it also change and influence the decisions that you make. So that one small impact will have a huge wave of results. And a lot of people will talk about like having lack of willpower. But like we don't see how we set ourselves up throughout the day. It's not a lack of willpower, it's all the crap that's happening in front of us. It's also creating those decisions that we feel like we're losing willpower. So actually starting with like being your best friend and being really compassionate, which is something that we're not really speaking about in English culture because it's a bit cringe. It's a bit like, oh, I don't like myself. That's horrible. Actually makes like a massive, profound difference. And so if you treated yourself like you would a friend or someone that you cared about, you'd probably have a different kind of outcome with your health. So for me personally, that's been a huge transformation for me. So that's the one healthy habit, and it's free, but it does take a little bit of checking in with yourself.
It's amazing. I love it. Self-compassion, be easy on yourself. I feel like this conversation has been as much about psychology as it has been about nutrition. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Together.
Yeah, they don't know exactly. Yeah. And the gut brain connection is probably a whole conversation for another day. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If people want to look you up, where can they find you? Do you want to give anything a plug? Like obviously we've mentioned your own podcast, which is amazing. I think we've sponsored it in the past. So
give anything
a plug.
I'm drinking my Exhale coffee next to me. Literally in my Live Well Be Well markets here.
Cool.
It's nearly finished.
Amazing.
So I'd say, listen to the pod, Live Well Be Well on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple, all the platforms. Come speak to me on my Substack, which is The Compassionate Cure, or come and speak to me on Instagram, which is just my name, Sarah Ann Macklin. I love hearing from lots of people, and also my content is like always like analysed from what people want in the demand. So come and tell me what you find interesting and I'll talk about it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been lovely having you. Cheers.
Thank you, Alex.
You've made it to the end. Congratulations. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Massive thank you to Sarah Ann Macklin for joining today. Look her up on her Instagram, has a great Instagram. Listen to her podcast. It's fantastic. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week for another episode of Modern Rituals by Excel.